$60 billion. That is how much Mark Carney just committed to building the largest submarine fleet in Canadian history. 12 submarines capable of hiding under Arctic ice for 21 days straight, patrolling 3,500 nautical miles without surfacing, completely invisible to American detection systems. And while Donald Trump threatens Arctic annexation and demands military control of Canadian waters, Carney just delivered the most devastating response in modern defense history. He built a submarine army that makes American Arctic dominance impossible. Canada has the longest coastline in the world, and it is essential that the Royal Canadian Navy be equipped with superior underwater surveillance capability to protect our country's security and Arctic sovereignty. That was the official statement when Carney announced Canada had shortlisted 2 companies for what defense analysts are calling the most significant military procurement since World War II. Not just submarines, a complete Arctic defense transformation that operates independently of American technology, American approval, and American permission. But before we dive into this incredible story, if you appreciate in-depth analysis like this, hit that like button and subscribe to stay informed on the stories that truly matter. Tonight, we're showing you how Mark Carney's submarine strategy just rewrote Arctic security forever. Why a secret partnership with Australia is giving Canada military capabilities Trump never anticipated, and how 12 underwater vessels will patrol Canadian territory for the next 40 years without asking Washington for anything. Let me tell you what happened that changed everything. Trump's national security strategy, released in November 2025, explicitly called for establishing United States dominance in the Western Hemisphere, including Greenland. The document stated America would reassert and enforce the Monroe Doctrine and ensure continued access to key strategic locations. That includes the Northwest Passage, the sea lane connecting Atlantic and Pacific through Canadian Arctic waters. For decades, this was managed through diplomatic compromise. The 1988 Arctic Cooperation Agreement required the United States to seek Canadian consent before sending icebreakers through the waterway. Trump's strategy document terminated that arrangement. Washington now views the passage as strategically vital for deterring Russia and China. The United States cannot afford, for reasons of deterrence and defense, a contingent capacity requiring Canadian permission. Translation: America wants unilateral access to Canadian Arctic waters without asking, without negotiating, by declaring it a national security necessity. Carney watched Trump threaten to annex Greenland. Carney watched Trump target Venezuela's president and resources through military pressure. Carney understood the message perfectly. If Trump views Arctic control as necessary for American security, Canada either defends its sovereignty independently or loses it forever. So Carney launched the most aggressive defense buildup in Canadian history, and he started with submarines. The submarine program represents the largest single defense procurement in Canadian history, worth between 20 and 60 billion Canadian dollars. On the 26th of August, Carney personally announced 2 finalists, Germany's Thyssen Marine Systems and South Korea's Hanwha Ocean. But here is what makes this procurement revolutionary. Carney didn't just announce a competition. He personally toured German facilities in Kiel and Hanwha shipyards in Georgi Island, the Prime Minister of Canada conducting hands-on defense diplomacy, examining submarine technology, negotiating delivery timelines. The requirements reveal the strategic intent. Submarines must operate under Arctic ice for weeks without surfacing. Extended range and endurance, providing stealth, persistence, and lethality. Deployment range of 3,500 nautical miles. Covert patrol capability for 21 days straight. These aren't coastal defense vessels. These are long-range patrol submarines designed to control vast ocean territories independently. Hanwha Ocean promises 4 submarines delivered by 2035 if contracts are signed in 2026. First delivery targeted for 2032. Then, 1 submarine per year until 12 are delivered by 2043. Total cost estimated between $20 and $24 billion. Thyssen Group offers established reliability, having supplied 70% of NATO's conventional submarine fleet. They emphasize Arctic-capable performance with proven track record in extreme conditions. Either way, Canada gets submarines specifically designed for Arctic operations using technology completely independent of American systems. Once operational, these submarines will patrol Canadian Arctic waters, monitor Northwest Passage traffic, and enforce sovereignty without requiring United States Navy support or permission. This represents a fundamental shift in Arctic security architecture. But submarines are just the beginning of Carney's strategy. The over-the-horizon radar system launching in 2026 will detect threats 3,000 kilometers away using Australian technology adapted for Arctic conditions. And here is the brilliant part: this isn't American technology. Canada partnered with Australia, which developed over-the-horizon radar independently for similar sovereignty challenges. Australia's Jindalee network has been operational for decades. 3 radar stations covering Australian approaches with detection ranges spanning thousands of kilometers. Proven technology that Australia is sharing with Canada through knowledge transfer, technical cooperation, and interoperability planning. But the actual infrastructure being built is Canadian, constructed on Canadian soil, operated by Canadian personnel under Canadian command. This gives Canada several strategic advantages: proven technology with decades of operational experience, complete independence from American surveillance systems, diplomatic flexibility to share information with allies on Canadian terms rather than American demands, and it signals to other American allies that you don't need Washington for critical defense technologies. Middle powers can cooperate directly, building capabilities that serve mutual interests without American involvement. The radar system covers all approaches to Canadian Arctic territory. 4 radar sites when fully operational. 2 transmit, 2 receive. Initial capability planned for 2029. Full operational capability projected for early 2030s. Detection of aircraft, cruise missiles, potentially even ballistic missile trajectories. Real-time monitoring of everything entering Canadian airspace or territorial waters. Combined with submarine patrols, this creates comprehensive Arctic surveillance that rivals anything except superpowers. Canada will know what is happening in its territory without depending on American intelligence. Canada will control access to its detection data. Canada will determine patrol priorities and enforcement actions. The timing reveals how seriously Carney takes Trump's threat. Initial radar construction starts this winter. Contracts signed, land acquired, environmental assessments underway, construction crews preparing. Operational capability targeted for end of 2029. That is just over 3 years from initial construction to working surveillance system. Extremely aggressive timeline for military procurement that normally takes a decade or more. First submarine delivery targeted for 2032, if contracts are signed in 2026, 7 years from contract to operational submarine. Again, very fast for submarine procurement that typically requires 10 to 15 years. Canada is demanding accelerated delivery because the current Victoria-class fleet is falling apart. Only 1 submarine currently operational out of 4. The Navy cannot wait for normal procurement timelines. Full submarine fleet projected for 2043. 18 years from now, Canada will have 12 modern submarines with crews trained through decades of operational experience. This gives Canada nearly 2 decades to develop operational doctrine, establish patrol patterns, and build institutional knowledge spanning multiple generations of submariners. Here is what makes this strategy particularly devastating to American Arctic ambitions. These submarines operate for 30 to 40 years once delivered. Submarine forces require decades of training, doctrine development, and operational experience. Canada will build institutional knowledge that persists regardless of political changes in Ottawa or Washington. Once Arctic radar sites are operational, they don't get dismantled. Detection capability becomes baseline expectation for Canadian defense. Future governments inherit the infrastructure and strategic autonomy it provides. Once submarine bases, maintenance facilities, and communications networks are established, they become permanent military infrastructure that would be politically impossible and strategically foolish to shut down. This is the same path dependency strategy Canada used with major infrastructure projects. Spend years building despite opposition. Once operational, infrastructure creates facts on the ground that aren't easily reversed. Future governments inherit capabilities and adjust policy. Accordingly, Trump inadvertently created perfect political conditions for Canada to make investments it should have made decades ago. By threatening Canadian sovereignty, Trump eliminated domestic opposition to massive defense spending. Canadian polling shows this resonates across political spectrum. 80% of Canadians believe Arctic sovereignty must be actively defended or Canada risks losing it. Historical and legal claims aren't enough without physical presence. When asked about potential American annexation of Greenland, only 7% wanted Canada to keep low profile, half supported diplomatic action. The other half backed forceful response, including sanctions on the United States or military support for Greenland. Trump's rhetoric united Canadians in determination to defend sovereignty and eliminated traditional resistance to defense expenditure. Prairie premiers who normally oppose federal spending are supportive. Ontario manufacturers see economic opportunity in domestic defense production. Quebec recognizes strategic necessity for Arctic sovereignty. British Columbia understands Pacific security implications. Carney can now justify $38.6 billion for NORAD modernization, $60 billion for submarines and billions more for Arctic infrastructure, because Trump made the threat undeniable. The Australia connection demonstrates how middle powers can cooperate to reduce dependence on American military technology. Australia faced similar challenges with vast territorial approaches impossible to patrol through conventional radar systems. They developed independent solutions that proved effective for decades. Now Canada licenses that technology and adapts it for Arctic environments. This partnership signals to other American allies that alternatives exist. You don't need to accept American demands for access to your territory or resources. You can build independent defense capabilities through partnerships with countries facing similar challenges. European NATO allies coordinate Arctic security separate from American channels. Japan and South Korea develop Arctic monitoring capabilities. India invests in polar research infrastructure. Middle powers cooperating with each other creates alternatives to American dominance. Not opposition or hostility, just options and flexibility. When Trump demands submission, allies can build capabilities that reduce American leverage. When Trump threatens sovereignty, allies can respond with infrastructure that enforces independence. The submarine competition reveals how global defense markets work when America isn't the preferred supplier. Germany's Submarine systems offers established NATO compatibility and proven Arctic performance. South Korea's Hanwha Ocean provides competitive pricing and aggressive delivery schedules. Both companies compete aggressively for Canadian contracts because they understand the strategic significance. Whichever company wins will establish long-term relationships with Canadian defense industries, submarine maintenance, crew training, technology transfer, and future upgrades create decades of commercial partnership. Canada gains not just submarines but domestic defense industrial capacity that supports strategic autonomy. If Canada executes this strategy successfully, Arctic security transforms completely. By 2030, Canada has operational radar covering all northern approaches. Any aircraft, cruise missile, or surface vessel entering Canadian Arctic airspace or waters gets detected immediately. Canada knows what is happening in its territory without American intelligence support. By 2035, Canada has 4 to 6 submarines operational, enough to maintain continuous patrol presence in at least one ocean at all times. Arctic underwater surveillance becomes routine. Canada can monitor Northwest Passage traffic, deter unauthorized entry, and enforce sovereignty through persistent submarine presence. By 2040, full submarine fleet and complete radar network operational. Canada possesses comprehensive Arctic surveillance and patrol capability matching any nation except superpowers. Middle power with great power Arctic presence, all operating under Canadian command. United States can request information sharing or coordination, but Canada decides terms and conditions. That represents ultimate victory, strategic autonomy. The ability to defend Canadian interests independently, even when those interests diverge from American preferences. Not military dominance over the United States, but independence from American military dependence. This Canadian strategy demonstrates a template other middle powers can follow. Build independent defense capabilities through partnerships with allies facing similar challenges. Invest in proven technologies adapted for local conditions. Create facts on the ground through infrastructure that persists across political changes. develop institutional knowledge and operational experience that can't be quickly dismantled or redirected. The ultimate irony is that Trump's aggressive approach to allies pushes those allies to become less dependent on American military power. The very dominance Trump seeks to assert creates conditions for allies to build alternatives that reduce American influence. Canada leads this shift with Arctic submarines and radar demonstrating that even close American allies can pursue strategic autonomy when American demands become intolerable. Both are allies watch and learn. Trump demanded submission, Carney built submarines. Trump threatened annexation, Canada created submarine army. The difference will patrol Arctic waters for 40 years, enforcing Canadian sovereignty every day. Trump's threats are forgotten. 12 submarines hiding under Arctic ice, invisible to American detection, protecting territory Trump thought he could control. The $60 billion investment that just made American Arctic dominance impossible forever.